good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the SSF Romcast. I am always Jessica Haynes, and for the spooky season that we are in, we are bringing you a fantastic panel this evening. Now, I am joined, as always, by my super duper awesome co host.
Emma Jackson. Hello. So, yeah, as Jess said, we're doing Gothic for this month because it's October and it has to be done.
Tis the
Um,
season.
yeah, exactly. We are joined by three wonderful authors who are going to answer some questions for us. In just a moment, we'll go into them giving us a little bit of an introduction. I just wanted to point out to listeners and viewers that with Gothic, because it's a little bit different to kind of the straightforward SFF romance genre, there can be a bit of a difference when it comes to the genre conventions that we normally talk about in terms of our books. So if anybody doesn't want spoilers because endings of books don't always end the way romance readers necessarily expect them to, then just to be aware of that. I think you should all stay and listen because it's going
Yes.
to be really interesting, but just in case, hate those spoilers. So if anyone's worried, there's just a little alert for people there. Okay, so we will start with the introductions. I will go alphabetically. So, Angela, if you'd like to tell us a bit about yourself and your books.
Wonderful. Well, I am so excited to be here. I'm Angela J. Ford, a fantasy romance author, and I sort of write in a few different genres, all under the fantasy umbrella. But I've always been obsessed with the ideal of Gothic fiction. And so my two books, Music of the Night and Wicked Prince of Mirrors, are really perfect for the spooky season because they really incorporate that whole Gothic vibe. And so I write very lush, atmospheric stories. I love the romance. I love the just the swooniness of it, the tension, and all of my books guaranteed happily ever after. So you never have to worry and feel stressed about the ending. It will end up happily. You'll be stressed reading it because you'll wonder how in the world will that happen, but that will happen at the end. And so I absolutely love fast-paced reads, and so all of my books are quicker. You can read them usually in a couple of sittings.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you so much. And CM?
Hello, I'm Sam Rosens. I'm a genre-bending hybrid author of Gothic horror and dark SFF. I usually write in the Gothic mode, whatever genre I'm writing in. So a lot of my work is steeped in Gothic tropes, Gothic themes, and I think I will mostly be talking about my first novel, The Crows, which originally came out in 2020 today, and it was picked up for reissue by Canelo Horror in 2024. That was re-released. And so I've sort of become a trad author by accident because Canelo is now a part of DK Publishing. So I'm now both indie and trad, I suppose. So
Excellent.
yeah,
That
that's
sounds
that's
like the
me.
least stressful way to
Oh,
become a trad
yeah,
author.
stumble upon it.
Yeah,
Just why
just kind
not?
of
Tripped and fell.
segue into
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I fell into a book deal.
wonderful. And Jenny, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jenny Kennedy or Jennifer Kennedy. It's on the book. And this will be my first novel, which is Gothic horror, and it is full of Gothic tropes. And when I set out to write it, I wanted to include as many Gothic tropes as I could, because I do love uh, Gothic fiction, and movies and things. So, as this was my first book going out, I just thought I need to make it as dark and as spooky and as gothic-y as I can possibly make it. So it's called Our Gifted Hearts. I don't know if I said that. And it's out this month. I feel like I'm the real newbie here because this is my debut. So it's all a bit exciting
It's
having all
very
the
exciting. Yeah,
tours and things and online Instagram tours and things like that. So it's been very nice.
fantastic. Well, we're very
Lovely.
happy to have you with us.
Always more of these books in the world is what we're after.
Mhm.
Oh, this is me. This is where we
It's
always
you,
go.
yeah.
It's me. Sorry, there is a list of things. All right, so we're going to dive in with the questions. So, Gothic literature crosses over a lot of themes with SFF romance, from supernatural abilities, monsters, hauntings to romances with questionable love interests. Angela, would you say Gothic was the original dark romance?
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I always remember thinking back to growing up and what I was exposed to watching and reading as well. I really grew up with the whole, Disney, you have Cinderella, you have Snow White, you have this knight in shining armor really coming in to sweep away the female main character and just give her her happily ever after. And then I recall that, and we have Beauty and the Beast as this outlier there. Although it has been very romance. But I also read Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights, and I just remember those two stories really struck with me. I was like, wow, like the atmosphere is wild. And then the love interest is not a knight in shining armor. He's moody, he's broody. Like it is just so mysterious and interesting. And there was always this like insulation and these creepy things happening at the house. And I was like, I love this. This is fantastic. And so I just remember thinking about that, and I naturally kind of fell into writing it, but it was always something just very curious and just very like a step away from the norm. And I think when there's something that's mysterious and we don't instantly understand it, it makes us want to figure out, okay, what's going on? How can I discover this? How can I read more about this? How can I figure out if the two characters are going to end up together because they're so opposite of each other? And so, yeah, I think really Gothic really started out as the original dark romance and it just took off from there.
Yeah, this is it. So you mentioned the Disney stuff, and I remember doing it as a kid as well. And then there is just something so different. You've got all these princes, and they're a little bit bland, and then you get this one thing that you're like, oh my God, how are you this different? Yeah, and it just strikes that new chord that makes you want to just tug on it, doesn't it?
Yes, it really just brings you in. So I absolutely love that. And it's a little bit different. We don't have the blonde hair and the blue eyes anymore.
Yeah, yeah, dark hair all the way.
It does start very young, that I think,
It
doesn't it?
really does.
Hang on, the villains are just more interesting, aren't they? And we want to figure out what's going on with them. Does anyone else want to add anything to that about sort of the parallels between? I mean, I'm kind of thinking of dark romance now is really, really popular, the genre, and I think it's yeah, that whole idea that the love interest is questionable and you don't know, whether it could be a happily ever after or not. That feeds in a little bit with Gothic. What do you think, CM?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's something so transgressive about the Gothic that really comes naturally to that genre, and it's also quite eroticized. A lot of Gothic horror, particularly the sort of, I'd say, original Gothic, like the 18th century stuff, 19th century stuff, all of that is really like repressed eroticism, just
Mm.
like bubbling. There's so much of that going on, and there's so much of also the really weedy hero that doesn't really do a lot against this villain that's the one that's locking ladies in castles or keeping them in the crypt of their dead mother or like whatever it is that's going on. And there's just so much that enables you to explore the darker side of what you want and the darker side of desire and represents all of those twisted parts of the shadow side, I suppose, of you as a reader, but also, it's there on the page as the characters. And so I think, yeah, I would totally agree with Angela there. And like Beauty and the Beast, Angela also, yes. Like, I think that was my gateway drug.
What
Ladies
about
of a
you?
certain age, it is,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it definitely is. What about you, Jenny? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think they didn't realize what they were doing when they added Wuthering Heights to the curriculum. And
Yeah.
there's a, a whole generation of people who fell in love with Gothic because of that, and these, villains and dark heroes, and this kind of love that is toxic, but it's so passionate. And when you're a teenager reading that, it's like, oh, I want this for me. Not realizing how awful that would be in real
Yes.
life. But yeah, Dark Heroes
Ticks
all the
all
way.
boxes.
Okay, so Gothic novels have never really seemed to go out of fashion. I mean, obviously, we're talking about like all across centuries here. What do you think it is about them that keeps them relevant to each generation, Jenny?
I think, well, like you were saying, with ghost stories and horror stories and things like that, they've been around forever. And I think when the Gothic genre started in like the 1700s, it really pulled on this thread of this sense of unease or stepping into the unknown. So I feel like it really centers around people's fear of the unknown. What could be in the darkness, what are we all most scared of, which is death or life after death. What could be around after we die? Are there really ghosts? Are there werewolves on a full moon? Things like that. And I think that kind of appeals to everyone, no matter what age you are. But particularly as well, I think it's the tropes that Gothic fiction has, like the isolation and um trying to think, like stepping into the unknown, like I've said. But when you're young, especially, and for me, this resonated, you're surrounded by things that you have to do and people, and life is really busy and can be overwhelming. And when you step into a Gothic world, it's very isolated and calm, even though there's this creeping sense of dread through the whole thing. But that's kind of how you feel, or how I felt as a child in everyday life, like there's something not quite right. And it really plays on that. And I think it's like that moment. Well, horror's been around for a long time, but in the horror movies, when you see the girl, like, going down into the basement, and everyone's like, no, don't go down into the basement. What are you doing? And it's like that moment of, she knows she shouldn't go down, but she's going to anyway because she has to know the answer. It's that, but in 400 pages. And I think that really appeals to a lot of people. And it's escapism, isn't it? It's escape from the real world that you're living in, into that unknown universe of Gothic fiction, which is creepy but also fascinating at the same time.
Definitely. We
Does
talk
it?
quite often, don't we, Jess, about like how much Gothic we can make our houses on the inside, even if they look normal on the outside. Everybody wants a long, flowy nightgown and
They
to be
really
running
do.
around in the moonlight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I do. I recently bought a candelabra with ravens on it. You won't see it, it is on my table, but I had to have this thing, and it was kind of, I would not leave the shop until it was in my cold fingers. So yes, but the outside, you would also know that it's very Gothic inside. Anyway, did anybody have anything to add? CM?
Um, yeah, no, I think that's absolutely it. And I think that every generation has got that experience of um, kind of stepping out for themselves into their sort of normal everyday lives and then starting to kind of find their place in that and then starting to think about how other people's decisions are impacting them. And the Gothic is all about hidden things coming to light and what happens and how do you deal with that if what is coming to light is actually quite dark and quite bad, and that is then having a negative impact on your present. And so that's kind of the haunted by the past trope. And I think that's probably why Gothic, or one of the reasons why the Gothic tends to have a resurgence every few generations or so, or every few decades or something like that, just because the different themes of it really strike a chord with what's going on right now in the culture or the zeitgeist, I think. And people start to question, you know, sort of their current realities and the current society that they're living in, and what are the skeletons in the closets, and what happens when those skeletons fall out, and how do we deal with that as a society, and also how do we deal with the darkness? How do we cope with that? And there's just some ways in which, you know, that the Gothic offers you ways to look at that and ways to deal with it, I suppose in ways that other genres perhaps don't offer, because it doesn't shy away from looking things head on, but then it also allows you to explore things quite safely through monstrosity and monsters and, you know, that sort of thing, and sort of the other. And that resonates with people as well. What happens when you're othered by society? What happens when you're not, you know, really part of it, or you don't feel part of it? And then people can use that and then reinvent that for themselves. And I think that's why Gothic for writers is like so important, because you've got so much you can play with and you can twist around and you can subvert. That's the word I'm looking for. You can subvert it. And there's just so much really good writing coming out of like Gothic written by queer people, LGBTQ plus people, by like people of color, Black authors. Like there's some really interesting things you can do with the Gothic that reflect different aspects of what you want to say. And I think that's just why like anyone can play with it and it can become anything for anyone. And I think that's one of the reasons, yeah.
Cool. And Angela, have you got anything else you want to add?
This is just such a fun conversation. It's difficult to think of something to add that hasn't already been said because I agree, like these are all the reasons we come to it. So I'll just add to it that I remember in college when I was reading Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and just thinking about that really gothic focus and how it was just the repressions of society really just forcing you to be one way. And then as soon as the sun goes down, just being someone completely different. And so that is a theme that I love to explore. I explored it in my latest release, Wicked Prince of Mirrors. Like, what really happens when you are the monster? And I think there's something to that that makes it something that people come back to again and again, because there are always things in life that we don't understand. And when we're reading books and we really did dig more into the supernatural and into the reflections and the finding out what's inside of the darkness, I think there's really something to that where people want to read it because they want to figure out maybe I'm just misunderstanding this. And once I understand it, it won't be as scary anymore. Or maybe it'll just be absolutely terrifying. And so I think that really brings people back to the genre because there is that shadow, that mystery. It's like pulling down the veil and figuring out, okay, this is actually what's going on, and this is why, and this is either like really terrifying or it was a horrible misunderstanding.
I'll say, yeah, I love that. Just the fact that they pull down the veil and then there were just so many new doors that they could open instead. You know, you think you get this one thing and then actually, oh, so many other routes to go down. I'm loving
That
it.
sounds so, that really made me think that that's so interesting for Gothic as well, in that it's like, it's about things that you fear outside, but also within yourself. It's that, like, on both sides of it. That's quite different in terms, I mean, horror obviously because it like blends in with horror, but a lot of the time the things that you fear are like outside of the character, but they're very like inside the character too, aren't they? It's
Can I just
awesome.
add to that as well?
Yeah, of course.
I was just thinking about how I really like how adaptable Gothic fiction is and the Gothic genre is. So it's I think it's changed a lot over time. Where it'd be more in in the 17 early 1800s, there'd be women trapped in castles and then getting saved by a man. But now it's coming out. It's much more about empowerment, I feel, and there's a lot more stories of you know women finding their own power. And that was really important to me when I was writing All Gifted Hearts, that the main character, Fortune, that she becomes empowered by the end of the novel. And she relies on herself and she finds out that she is unique. And so is everybody, the message is, so is everybody, everybody has their own power. And it's adaptable in other ways as well. It's talking about speaking to new generations, like things like Twilight and the vampires, and going into all these other kinds of genres, dipping into Gothic, but also other genres as well. So yeah, I think it's really adaptable and it changes in a good way.
So yeah, dip your toes in all the waters. Loving it. All right, so next question. Haunted houses. Again, time of year for it. So they're always popular settings for Gothic novels, whether it's haunted by ghosts or, as we've just discussed, it's actually real people going on in there. CM, the house in your book, The Crows, is actually sentient with its own avatar. What inspired you to go that step further with it?
Okay, so I wanted a Gothic horror monster love interest that I could play around with in different ways. And I've always loved sentient houses as a horror trope, where it's the house itself that's behind the apparent haunting or the activity rather than a ghost. It turns out, that's usually the twist, right? And I was thinking, when I was writing it, about Stephen King's Rose Red, which is a miniseries, and Salem's Lot, obviously, and the way the house is described as being inherently evil. And I was like, oh, that's not fair, is it? Where's the other house rep? I don't know. Um, and about Hill House in Shirley Jackson's novel, about how Gothic manors and castles are more than just settings. They're almost characters in the book, or they are characters in the book in the same way that cities are characters in urban fantasy. So much more than a setting, they have their own characters, their own personalities. I also really love Phantom of the Opera. And I was thinking particularly about the isolated outcast trope and ways I could bring that out in the house itself, because the house itself is a ruin. It's on the outskirts of a dilapidated seaside town. It's called Fairwood House, but nobody calls it that because there's a big murder of crows that lives in and around the ruin, and that's the only thing that kind of lives there. And so locals just call it the Crows, and that's the name of the book. So the idea of its consciousness manifesting as like a humanoid avatar just really appealed to me, because then it could interact in different ways. And I could play with the ways a house might outwardly manifest its renovation trauma, for example, and have the avatar kind of proudly displaying all those changes and the ravages of time outwardly in the form of really strangely shaped scars and differences. I could play with its gender presentation and have the avatar be quite fluid in the ways it presents itself. And that leans more fully into androgyny in later books as well. So there are three. There's The Crow's 13th and The Day We Ate Grandad, and then there's lots of short stories and novellas. But in The Crows, there's still very much a kind of binary male or female presentation, because it chooses to appear either as its last owner, which was a man called Sir Jack Sauvant, because Carrie, who's its current owner, said that she really liked his portrait. So it thought that that was what it should appear as to her, even though he's been dead for, since like the 1970s or something. So that's not disconcerting at all. But it can also appear as Carrie's doppelganger, because she's the current owner of the house. And so there's this really weirdly erotic moment of self-exploration in that presentation between them. And I found that really fun to write. There's like a bath scene. Anyway.
We love a good bath. We have so many podcast episodes with it. It's fine.
The bath scene. Yeah, I tried to kind of subvert that a little bit. So yeah. But I also have an anti-villain in the book that is human. He's sort of a monster boy. And I wanted something that contrasted with him as well. So that's why the house is more kind of eroticized, which people find quite weird, but I guess weird in a good way is the feedback that I've had. Whereas Ricky Porter, who's the second main character, is a touch-starved cannibal who's asexual and sex-averse, and he lives in the woods next to the house. And he can see the future, and his family are a bunch of eldritch abominations. There's a bit of cosmic horror in there as well. But he's loved the house since he was 5 years old, and he's never been able to own it or get in there even. And so you end up with this kind of triangle, why choose queer platonic thing going on that's really weird and twisted and between the current owner, Carrie, her house, and the cannibal boy next door, basically. Um, and I've just really grown up around old houses. Like obviously here in the UK, we've got so many of them and like National Trust properties. And I don't think I've ever lived in a modern house. I think I've always lived in really old houses. Um, and they've just got layers of centuries of history. And so I'm quite used to the different voices and vibes and feelings that different rooms and different parts of old houses have. I don't know if anyone knows what I mean, but like if you go into a very old house, the kitchen has been done up, and that feels very different to the way that maybe the attic feels, or the way that the drawing room feels, or the way that some very drafty second bedroom that nobody uses feels. Um, and so I wanted to bring all of that into it when I was thinking about the house as a character and give it its own personality. Um, and then, like with different personalities, different identities, all vying for attention in different ways, and how I could use that, and then give it an avatar that coalesces all of that into its own personality. Um, yeah, so that's kind of where all of that came from and all of the things that went into it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was gonna say, to me, it kind of makes sense in a way. It's going to not make sense how I explain it, but my house, it's quite new. It's like 17 years old. But where we are in Derbyshire, it's a full mining village. So all of the houses are built on the old mines. So there's so much history on all the grounds. So yeah, to think that that comes through the buildings. So we've got some very old buildings as well, that those little snippets in history can live through the brickwork and everything. It's a fantastic concept to sit and just to read about and yeah, be able to put together. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
awesome. Sorry, that's not a great way to say it, but yeah, I totally get what you're
Um,
saying.
it is always fascinating when you go into old buildings, like you say, we have a lot um, in the UK, and you just thinking what the walls have seen.
Yes.
It's just so fascinating, always. Um, so as we're talking about haunted houses, maybe we can just ask Angela and Jenny if you have anything along those lines in your books too. Have you explored, having haunted houses or, and how spooky do they get? If I start with Angela.
Yes, so I haven't gone full spooky, sentient, alive kind of haunted house vibe, but I think it is very interesting to think about the stories that a building can tell. And I always like thinking about my setting and the atmospheric vibe of the setting. And so in Music of the Night, one of the things that I really wanted to do was, even though there was an opera, I actually put the tower separate from the opera house. And so Music of the Night is Phantom of the Opera retelling, but I really wanted to focus on the fact that the Phantom actually gets the girl because I thought that should happen. That's a true Gothic moment right there. But there is this tower that's set apart from it, and it's all just very like spooky. Like you can hear singing coming from it. There's mist and shadow surrounding it, and everyone just looks at it and goes, "That's the haunted tower over there. We do not go there." So of course the main character, what does she do? She goes there. But and so she discovers that it's not the tower that's haunted, it's the man, the phantom that lives within the tower. And it's just the fact that he is just such a strong, powerful character. And it's almost like his spirit, his whole vibe just envelops that place. And so the stones of the tower really just take on his personality, his power, his magic, and it almost like becomes him because that is the place that he dwells. And so I always like to think about homes and like kind of the haunting like that. It almost like it takes on the personality of the person that dwells there. And if you have multiple people dwelling there over time, how many stories does the house tell?
Brilliant. It's kind of like the reverse, isn't it?
Mhm.
Of CMs in the house is manifesting into an avatar and it goes the other way.
Hmm.
And what about you, Jenny?
Um, well, I could just talk all day about houses, all day. My favorite hobby is going on Rightmove and just
Yeah.
scrolling and looking at all
Same.
the pictures. Absolutely love it. And I've have so many haunted house stories from growing up with my big family, all different types of houses. And like CM, I've always lived in old houses. But in Our Gifted Heart, it was I just think houses are just so integral to the Gothic fiction tropes. Like they're really important. They need to be their own character in a way, no matter if it's a little flat or if it's a castle or wherever, it's got to have a presence in the story. Um, so yeah, it was really important to me that I got the house right in Our Gifted Hearts, and it's set on an island, and it's like a huge castle type mansion house. Um, and I actually based it on a castle that is on the Isle of Scilly, which is off the coast of Cornwall. And that castle was built in, I think it was 500 AD, I think. And its outer walls are in the shape of a star, and it was a military base. Um, So it was based on that. So I knew they existed. So I was like, no, there are actually castles on islands in the middle of nowhere, these outposts. So I based the house on that, and it is fully haunted. So when Fortune gets there, she very quickly realizes, I think it's almost immediately, she feels like there's, a presence in the house. Um, and it's very old and cold and dark, and there's lots of rooms that she doesn't go in, that are unused or locked. So there's lots of secrets at the house. Um, but yeah, so it was really important. I hope I've pulled it off to get that set and right, because I I do love writing about houses and reading about houses of any kind.
That kind of goes really nicely into the next question, talking about like the haunted house trope. Because there are some really recognizable narratives within Gothic, like you get Faustian bargains, revenge, imprisonment, haunting, vampires, and unreliable narrators. So this is for everyone, we'll go round, but we'd love to know, what is your favorite type, and does your book or your books fall into it? If you've written more than one. So, shall we start with Angela?
Okay, I love all of these tropes. I would say the number one that I use all the time is the revenge trope. Like I want my main characters to be very passionate, very loving, like very strong feelings about what they desire. And so oftentimes I think about revenge, and most of my books actually do lie along the revenge plot where someone's like, someone did this to me. They cursed me. They bound me. I'm stuck in this place. And so I'm going to get back at them. I'm going to figure out how to do that. And so in Music of the Night, the main character, he is actually this whole collection, there are 5 books in the collection, is called Tower Knights, and it's about knights that were all cursed by a sorceress, and they are trying to break their curses. And so each book starts out with this knight that is trying to break his curse. And so it goes along those lines and is all about the revenge. And then they also happen to find love along the way and find someone that empowers them to help them with their revenge. But then in my latest, Wicked Prince of Mirrors, this is a prince that is bound and stuck behind a mirror. And so his quest is also for revenge, because what really happened to him is that someone stole his kingdom and trapped him behind a mirror. And so he's trying to get back and escape, get his kingdom back. And of course, the princess, the daughter of the man that stole his kingdom, is the one that accidentally sets him free. So great. We have all the tension is all roped in there together. But I love bringing together that revenge and then adding in that passion, and then bringing characters together that have no business being together and putting them in that Gothic setting. It just allows for so much to happen in the stories. And so, yeah, that's a good one.
Brilliant. CM?
I think Mine's got to be Haunted by the Past. That's my favorite one. I love the ways people attempt to escape choices that other people have made that are having ripple effects in time, and that idea of outrunning a fate that was decided before you were born, and clearing up the mess that somebody else has made, but they've been dead for 100 years. Like, I really like that. Um, and I love the ways that can manifest in plots. So whether that's a curse, which the crows may or may not have. There's lots of kind of superstition around the house and the story, like whether or not it's cursed, lots of kind of local superstition. Whether it's recent history that you're trying to outrun, like being stalked by an ex who won't go away, which is Carrie's situation, and he keeps turning up and making trouble for her. Or if it's trying to break a generational cycle that's meant that you're physically a monster and you're now stuck trying to work out how to live the life you want to live while also dealing with this family legacy, which is Ricky's situation. And the house itself in The Crows ties into that by literally embodying the centuries of its construction, reconstruction. It's seeing all of the town's dramas and all of Ricky's family's dramas and everybody's dramas kind of playing out. And that's all embedded in the walls. And it's got, like Jen was saying, sort of that imprint of its history coming through the building. Um, and it's got everybody's memories in it, and it's kind of tying everything together, and it can transfer memories by dreams or by, touch or something like that in the avatar form. And it also includes the ghost of a little girl that is trapped in the house who was murdered there 60 years before. And that sets off the mystery element of the novel and a bit of the revenge plot as well. So, yeah, but I think Haunted by the Past is the prominent feature in that rather than, yeah, any other trope. But that would be my favorite.
Hey, and Jenny, what's your favorite?
Um, there are so many, so many favorites, and I've included a lot of tropes in Our Gifted Hearts, but I think that the key theme is very similar to CM's about things from the past haunting you, or feeling imprisoned and then finding freedom. So becoming free of something, usually a self-inflicted prison, which is, shown as well by the outside prison. So in Our Gifted Hearts, Fortune's already um kind of locked herself out of the world because she doesn't, because of something happened to her in the past, and she decided she's never gonna, get married, and she will never have children, and she feels very strongly that that's never gonna happen. But she ends up kind of being coerced into getting married because she gets accused of witchcraft and this man offers her a way out. Um, but it's not what she thought it was going to be when she gets to the island. And the only way she can kind of free herself is by realizing that that prison that she's put herself in isn't really real. And she has control and she has power and she can do things that she didn't think she could do. That kind of runs through a lot of stuff that I write. This is my first novel, but it seems to be the theme of other things that I write as well. Short stories. So, you've been imprisoned and now you're going to be free, and they run along those same lines. But yeah, and the other one is vampires. Just vampires in general, just
Yeah.
anything to do with vampires. I
Yeah,
love a good
full stop.
vampire trope. Absolutely love it. And there may even be hints of that in Our Gifted Hearts as well. So yeah.
Ooh, that's the first time I've heard that about it. Like, ooh.
Yeah,
Why
it's not technically vampires, but
Mhm. Okay.
technically or not, that's fine. If it kind of skirts, we're fine with that.
it
Yeah.
skirts, yeah.
Yeah. So, why do we keep doing these panels? Because my TBR can't get any bigger, and then we get all of these books.
I know. It's so
Crazy.
hard. Just the
Any-
podcast in general does
I
that to us.
know. Not that it's a bad thing. So yeah, you're on about going back into the past, ladies. So, what was the first Gothic novel that you read, and what impact do you think it had on your good selves? Now, let's go backwards. Jenny, let's start with you this time.
Okay. Well, the first kind of novel that I read that gave me that feeling of Gothic tropes was A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And it's not technically a Gothic book, but the little girl, she loses everything. You know, her dad dies, she was rich and now she's poor, and then she's living in an attic by herself with this cruel woman controlling her and, you know, treating her badly. And I think that seems very Gothic to me. So she was, you know, and again, we go back to that. Maybe it all started then. I read this when I was about 8 or 9 years old. All goes back to that, you know, this girl having no power to eventually get out of that situation. I think though it's because the dad comes back, not because she does it herself, but that's by the by.
Well,
But
let her
then,
off. She was a child.
Yeah,
yeah, she
we'll
was only
forgive her.
little. But yeah, that was like me first. I think that was my first um thoughts on Gothic horror, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I really liked that idea of that isolation. And then it wasn't until later I read a lot of horror then. By the time I was like 11, I was 10, 11, I was reading Stephen King and Clive Barker and all these other crazy horror novels. Um, and then it was when I was a teenager and started reading Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, and Picture of Dorian Gray and those type of novels. And I was hooked from then, and yeah, I loved them.
Yeah, no looking back then, is there?
No.
All right, Sian, what about you?
Oh gosh. I think like Jenny, my first probably books that I read as a very young child that were written in the Gothic mode and not necessarily Gothic horror novels per se. So my gateway into the Gothic was probably via children's books that were at the time marketed as fantasy or mythological fantasy, but had so many Gothic tropes and themes in them that I think, you know, I read them as an adult and I was like, oh no, that's Gothic. So there was like Jenny Nemo's The Snow Spider was definitely one. But I think probably the one that had the most influence on me was Alan Garner's The Owl Service,
Oh,
which is, yeah, which is a young adult novel, for anyone who doesn't know, which is written in about 1967. And he actually learned Welsh to write that book. And then he doesn't use any Welsh in it, but he learned Welsh in order to kind of understand the myths and things better. And it's based on the Welsh myth of Blodeuwedd, who was a woman created out of flowers by the magician Marth, specifically to be a bride for Llewellyn Gyffes, because his mother Arianrhod had cursed him to never marry a human woman. So Blodeuwedd never had any choice in becoming Llew's bride. And when she gains a sense of selfhood, she actually falls in love with somebody else called Gronw, and they plan Llew's murder together. And so this, in sort of revenge, the myth unfolds, blah, 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 and Marth then curses Blodeuwedd to become an owl. And that's the myth, for penance sort of thing. And the story takes place in 1960s Wales, which was contemporary. So a contemporary YA novel, I guess, is what they would call it now. And it's about two teenagers, Alison and Roger, whose parents have just married each other. So they're now stepbrother and stepsister. They move to Wales to an old house. They meet the cook's son, Gwyn, who's their age. That starts a bit of a rivalry off between him and Roger. And there's a bit of like a kind of implied subtext that they kind of both fancy Alison a bit, which so it's kind of like that. That's more obvious in the adaptation. I think there was a BBC mini series about it that traumatized a whole generation of kids. And Alison finds this strange dinner service in the attic, which is a load of plates, like china plates, that have a pattern of flowers around the outside. And if you trace the pattern and fold it up, it turns into an owl. But every time she does that, the pattern disappears from the plate and then weird things start happening. And they basically find themselves trapped in a reenactment of the myth that repeats itself every few generations or so, where up to the point that every single time it happens, one of the boys or men involved in the triangle dies because the other one is directly involved in their death, which is incredibly dark for like a children's story. And so, yeah, and what Alison is doing is she's forcing Blood Iwer's spirit to kind of come back, but as an owl and as this spirit of chaos and destruction and vengeance. And the only way to break the curse is to remind Blood Iwer that she's supposed to be flowers. And that just, I choke up every time I think about it. Yeah, and like there's this, she wants to be flowers, but you make her owls. This horrible moment. And yeah, and I think that really had a profound effect on me. Even these many years later, I haven't read it for many years. And I don't know if it would stand up now or not because I haven't. I think Alan Garner's work tends to it's probably better if you read it as a kid, isn't it? If it's a kid's book. But there's the creepy house, the something in the attic, the hidden things of the past coming to light, forcing their way into the present. The idea of being trapped in a cycle that's rooted in this mythological structure you can't get out of. This inescapable sense of fate coming to get you just because you were born as part of this cycle and you didn't have a say in that. And I think also there's like that image of Blood Iwer herself that stuck with me, and that being forced into a shape that doesn't fit you. And I think because I grew up under Section 28, as did I think all of us here from the UK, and I had no understanding of my own place on like the asexual spectrum or my bisexuality, and I was undiagnosed neurodivergent because I'm a girl and we didn't diagnose girls with that. So just forcing myself into different shapes each day to see what fitted and what would like appeal to other people and what didn't. And this book's central idea of being forced into the wrong shape by other people and then that causing so much pain. And yeah, so that was something that really stuck with me. And a lot of my work, not just The Crows, but a lot of the books that I write has a lot of that in it and is kind of plays with all of those different aspects. Except The Crows and 13th and The Day We Ate Grandad, they're all set in East Sussex, not Wales. But yeah, and I think it's also why body horror is a big part of my writing as well, but done in quite a gothic way rather than a kind of David Cronenberg way, I suppose. Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, when things sink their teeth in at a young age, yeah, you can see how it will shape your life going forward. Or when you look back at this stage and go, actually, makes a lot of sense now, doesn't it?
Although I read The Owl Service for the first time only a few years ago, and I would say it does stand up as being
Ooh.
very unsettling and, yeah, just interesting and captivating, definitely.
Angela, throw yours in.
Oh, wow. Okay. I read a lot. I would say that probably two of the first ones that I read, The Portent by C.S. Lewis, not something that he's really known for, but that one struck with me. And then also Wuthering Heights, that was a big one. But I think it was really Jane Eyre that really just sunk into me. And I remember I finished the book and then I turned it over and just read it all over again because I was just like, wow. And thinking back to it, I still have that same copy that I read as a child and it's falling apart. It's a mess. But what I love is the fact that she came from a place that wasn't great. She was in an abusive household. She got sent to this terrible boarding school. She grew up there. She became a teacher, and then she was like, "Okay, I'm going to move on and become a governess, and go to this new place," which she did. But it was there that she really unlocked her own power and her own strength and really stood up for herself. And I think what surprised me about the book was when she discovered that Mr. Rochester was already married, she didn't sit back and go, okay, no, I will be your mistress. She was like, no, I have strong convictions and I'm going to stand by them, even though it means I now have absolutely nothing. I have no home, I have no money, I have nothing. I'm going to stand by my convictions. And that was just so impressive to me, that she really stood up and she didn't lie down and let life just run over her. She wasn't submissive. She stood up and she took her power and she took life into her own hands and she did something with it. And that to me, I was like, wow, like this is just some empowerment right here. And I also love the fact that he did have this wife up in the attic and it was creepy and all of that. I almost wish that it had been a monster or something like that, because that would have been more exciting. But I thought it was really interesting thinking back to the fact that he also went ahead and cared for his wife that was absolutely mad and just wanted to kill him. And so he went ahead and cared for her. And then when the fire happened, he became disfigured. It was almost like a way of him becoming a monster himself and just like allowing himself to just really sink into his misery. So that was just interesting there, and the fact that Jane did come back after all and was able to have that moment. But I was just really struck by the fact that she did not give in because it was something she did not believe in, and so she just did not give in. And so that is something that has struck with me, and that recurring theme I have written into my books, just really just women finding their power and standing in it.
I was going to say,
It's
yeah, with the last panel, we had the same kind of theme that it happened then and it's still happening now, that it's just, yeah, women empowering themselves and still pushing forward for whether it's, just general life, sexuality, whatever it is, just still going out there and just, yeah, not being put upon by anybody else.
Yeah. And I
yeah.
think the other thing that's really important is that you have to give yourself the permission. You do not have to wait for someone else to give you permission. You give it to yourself and you say, it is okay for me to do this. And then you go out and you do it no matter what. And that to me is something that, gosh, I hear so many stories and I'm like, give yourself the power, give yourself the confidence and the power, and just go out there and do it. It will be incredible.
It's so fascinating because I think Jane Eyre was probably the first like actual Gothic. Like Jenny, I probably read stuff that skirted the Gothic, but that was the first Gothic. But it was crazy to think that was like the first kind of feminist take, even though I was reading contemporary stuff. It didn't have that feel to it, even though that was like from years and years before, and it still had it. So yeah, it's really, yeah, it's one of my favorites, Jane Eyre as well. I love that one.
Love it. I found it surprising that it was in that book, and I'm like, I'm not finding a lot of women authors that are writing this.
Yeah.
So that also to me was very surprising.
But it's wonderful that that really feels like it's changed. The landscape has changed massively, yeah. Especially like at the moment, the female rage is very, very prominent at the moment in books, definitely. And like Jenny was saying, obviously, that features in yours as well, doesn't it? That taking her power and giving herself permission, like Angela said. It's very cool. So our last question is just a fun one because it's spooky season. We just would love to know, what are your plans for Halloween? If you do anything, if you fully embrace it, or if you're, just turn the lights off so nobody can come and ask for sweets kind of thing. It's all valid. Let us know. If we start with CM.
I am on the turn the lights out side of
Oh.
things. No, we don't get trick-or-treaters around by our way. It's just not a big thing. So I will be finishing up the 100 horror movies in 92 days challenge, probably,
Awesome.
which is where you try and watch 100 new to you films between the 1st of August and 31st of October. So I'm in the 80s now. I reckon I could get there. And I'm also going to be reading some spooky stories because I'm going to finish the hashtag a scare a day challenge, which is there's a challenge list on the Romancing the Gothic website, funnily enough, which is romancingthegothic.com. And you basically there's 31 stories or poems, and you try and read one a day. And I'm trying to do like a little creative response to them as well. So it goes from like 1600s all the way up to like modern day stories and poems. So yeah, I'll be doing some reading and watching some scary films.
Busy. Yeah. And Jenny, what are you doing for Halloween?
Well, I'll be trick or treating with my son on the Friday. It is Friday, isn't it, on
I
Halloween
think
this
it
year?
is a
It is,
Friday,
yes,
yeah.
Yeah, so we're going trick or treating, but then unusually my sister is having a big party the night after,
Fabulous.
and we're all getting dressed up, and I still don't know what I'm going as and have no outfit. So yeah, fingers crossed I find something.
Can you go as your character? Can you go as Fortune?
But no one will know who I am.
But then you tell them and then you say,
Yeah,
buy
you
my
tell them all
book.
about your book, yes.
That's what you
We're a
do.
sign.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I have a copy of right here.
exactly.
Yeah.
That sounds wonderful. And Angela, what do you do for Halloween?
Well, I'll probably watch Hocus Pocus because why not?
Hmm.
Every year, it's an annual tradition.
Yeah.
Just so funny. And then I'm going to work on my TBR because it is outrageous, and I have so many pretty books to read. And I'm like, why not? It's a good evening to sit down and read. There are no sports to take my attention away, so I will go with that.
Brilliant.
Excellent. I was going to say, Emma, what are you
Fantastic.
doing?
I will be out trick-or-treating as well with my girls. They are dressing up as Enid and Wednesday. Yeah, and I think I'm going as the teacher from the first season because I have the glasses and the hair is
Excellent.
virtually the same color. So, and I can wear a cardigan. So I'm just me.
It's just you, yeah.
Yeah, and my other half will probably be the monster. Um, yeah, and then we'll come back and probably watch a scary but not too scary film. I've got to try and judge it correctly for the ages of the kids. But, yeah, what about you, Jess?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, this is it. Mine are at weird ages. So the little one wants to, but the big
Mm,
girls don't want to go. They
mm,
want to watch scary films. So we're trying to find an appropriate for 13 plus scary
yeah,
film. So yeah, we're in the argument stage of what we're doing this year. But yeah, I have
yeah,
a spooky playlist and I have all of my decks ready to put out maybe next week, but
yeah,
maybe not. So yeah, we're in between. We may be doing a bit of everything.
yeah.
Well, I
Well,
think I'll be watching Hocus Pocus too,
yeah.
because
I
my
think just make it a
son, yeah,
yes.
he doesn't like horror movies. It's a
Oh,
travesty. I
so
don't know how this
Oh,
happened, but
they
he doesn't
always
like
go the
horror movies.
opposite way, don't
skips
they? That's the
generations, doesn't it?
thing.
So I'm like, should we watch Halloween? Should we watch it? No, we'll watch Hocus Pocus. Okay.
Yeah. I can't get my girls to watch Hocus Pocus. I put it on and they were like, oh, it's boring. And they
Oh,
wandered off. I was like, how dare you?
shut the door, lock it in.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure we'll find something. There's plenty out there, aren't there? Um, yeah, so I think that is everything. We've come to an end and we're gonna wrap up. If you would like to just have a little shout out for your like latest releases and where people can find them, that would be fantastic because I'm sure people have been listening and they're like, right, where can I find that book? I need to remember what the name of it is. So, Angela, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Well, my latest release is Wicked Prince of Mirrors. You can get it on Amazon. You can also get the signed copy, a book box, or a special edition on my website, angelajford.com. It is a villain gets the girl romantasy, very seeped in the whole Gothic vibes and lots of forbidden mirror magic. So it's a must read.
Fantastic. And CM?
So my book, The Crows, that we've been talking about, is available pretty much everywhere. You can order it from libraries if you don't have the money to buy it. But my latest release is a short story called Along the Xylophone Road, which comes out in the anthology Occupying Bodies from Black Hair Press on Halloween. So that's a very topical release. So that is a body horror anthology from a small indie Australian press, and it explores the idea that no monster is more intimate, more inescapable than the body you inhabit. So my story is about a revenant who's slowly decaying and on an endless journey along train tracks in a desert, trying to find the person they were in a long distance relationship with before the end of the world. And so it's quite sad. But yeah, so that's that. And all my work can be found on cmrosens.com, with all my buy links and everything. So if you need to look anything up, you can find it there.
Fantastic. And Jenny?
Yep, my latest and only publication
For now,
is
So far,
for now, so far, is Our Gifted Hearts, and it's a Gothic horror full of all the Gothic tropes that you know and love, and filled with feminine rage. So it comes out on October 14th. Perfect for Halloween.
Yeah, it will be out by the time this comes out. Well, because we're recording a
buy
little bit early,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it will be there. Yeah.
So it's out now.
Yeah.
Available on Amazon and Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, all bookshops, and all the links are on my Instagram on Linktree. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Super duper. All right, so thank you everybody for coming in today. As always with these, we could happily sit. I'm pulling Emma in because it's always the same, and chat to you guys for the rest of the evening, but we know you all have things to do. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the listeners and the watchers out there as well.
Yeah. And we'll be back next month in November with our first sci-fi romance panel. Because we're going to give that a little bit of attention, because it's all very much romantasy and fantasy romance a lot of the time. So we're going to give some love to the sci-fi too.
We do. We need to reach out into the depth of space and see what we can find.
That's
All
it.
right, until next time, people, have a lovely one.
Thank you.
Bye.